1935. Take one.
My name is Miriam Feldman. I'm known as Mimi, born and bred in LA in Hancock Park. I was in college at Otis Art Institute and I was finishing up, and there used to be parties and gallery openings and things were just starting to happen downtown. And I had a friend who had a loft at 3rd and San Pedro. And when I graduated my master's program in 1981, I moved down here to the Schwartz Yarn Company building, which is no longer there, and started hanging out at Al's Bar. I would work all day. It was August and really hot, and then I would be exhausted, and I'd come here every night and hang out and drink beer and shoot pool. Just sort of became a regular, and then I remember so clearly one day coming here, and Sandy Cruz was walking down those stairs. Somebody had told me that they were looking for bartenders, and so I was looking for Mark Kreisel, who I didn't know. And Sandy was marching down the stairs. She'd come to get her paycheck or something, and our eyes met, and it was love at first sight. And she just took me under her wing and brought me upstairs and introduced me to Mark, and I think I started working the next day. And we're still dearest of friends 30-something years later. Al's Bar had a very old-fashioned look. Red leather, plain old-fashioned bar at the back, green pool table in the middle, artwork and painting on the walls, but not that much going on. You know, signs telling you what was going to be happening. I think Mark had sort of wanted it to be an artist bar, but in those days it was still funky, really low-key. I loved it because it was dank and dark, and it had a really good old-fashioned jukebox with music that you'd want to hear that was loud enough but not too loud, and it was filled with regulars. And you could sit, you could drink beer, you could talk to people, you could shoot pool. Everybody in the bar knew each other. It was really my kind of place. And then on the weekends it would transform, and they'd have live music and bands would come, and it'd be overrun with people, and it'd be a whole other great scene on the weekends. Shortly after I started working there, Roger Herman came and did a mural up on the back wall and the front wall. And it was a mural of Pocahontas and John Smith. And it was really funny that that happened, because I met my husband, Craig O'Rourke, at Al's Bar in August of 1981, before I even worked there. Craig was sitting in the middle booth by the front wall with Drew Lesso. And I recognized Craig because he had a gallery then, the Vanguard Gallery, which was on 7th Street. And my friend Lavina and I used to go to openings there when I was in college. And Lavina had kind of a crush on Craig and thought he was good looking. And so I saw him and I thought, now's my chance. It was hot summer night. I was in my little gym shorts and t-shirt. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hi, I have to introduce myself to you so that I can introduce you to my friend," or something really embarrassing and stupid like that. And turned around and marched back to the pool table, at which point Craig told me Drew leaned over to him and said, "You're getting laid tonight, buddy." Sure enough, he was right. And Craig and I just started talking and really, really hit it off. At one point, we had broken up, and then we both came into the bar, and there was Roger Herman's mural of Pocahontas and John Smith. And everybody used to say that my story of meeting Craig was like John Smith and Pocahontas, because it was a similar thing of by proxy for a best friend. So when we saw that mural in there, and then we had to talk to each other because it was just too ironic. And it became, I like to say, the longest one-night stand in history. 32 years and 4 kids later, we're still together. The early 80s were pre any kind of attention down here. It was very nascent. It was just starting out. It was small and very hometown. Craig and I were sitting in the Atomic Cafe right next to Andy Warhol and his entourage one night, just having a hamburger. Everybody was really friendly and really low-key and supportive of each other. There were a lot of people around then who had big stories with sad endings.
I haven't painted in 2 months. I don't care about doing any paintings right now.
Andy Wilf, Jean-Michel Basquiat would be here. I mean, you'd see everybody, but nobody was really famous at that point. It was just a very neighborhood feeling. Everybody helped each other out. Everybody was building their lofts and putting things together and figuring out how to get their work shown. And it was very friendly. Not a lot of bright lights on it on that point. Craig's gallery had closed, and then he came here, and I think it was December of '81 that they opened the American Gallery here. It was in the hotel on the first floor. There was 3 or 4 rooms. Craig had a room here in the American Hotel directly above the bar. That was the room that he lived in for a good year and a half. And we used to spend a lot of time in that room. You would be up there on the weekends when I wasn't working, and the crazy lines would be down the street, and fights and screaming, and the band's playing, and it was nuts. You could look out the window and see people that you know walking by and have conversations and keep an eye on who was arriving at the bar and who was leaving with whom. People would come down here from everywhere because it was just the happening place. The sound used to come up from that floor like a volcano. They would start playing and the floor would rumble, and then you would hear that bass line all night long, screams and shrieks and louder frequencies coming through. And then at 2 a.m. when the bar closed, this strange lull would come on the whole place. There'd be a lot of noise in the street of people leaving for the night and stuff going on down in the street, and then everything would get quiet. Time to sleep. We usually sleep until well into the middle of the next day and do it all over again. It was a great time. George Jarvis. He was kind of the soul of the American Hotel. He would be there all the time. In the background there he was with his broom or his mop. I always thought he would have been great as a butler in the Queen's Palace or something, because he was very unobtrusive and would take care of his business, but never get in the way of anybody, never bother anybody. He was always neat as a pin, had his white shirt, his nice hat, his trousers, pretty much his uniform. He developed friendships with a lot of the people that were here. Craig and George had close friendship and talked about all kinds of things, but he was a little more distant with me. Maybe with the women that was the case. To us, George was very comforting to have around because he was old school, he was mannered. All this craziness was going on around him here at the American Hotel, all these young kids and drugs and sex and craziness. And George just sort of moved through it like a minnow and didn't let it affect him. Kind of looked the other way because it must have been uncomfortable for him, but somehow he just moved through it all and did his job and minded his own business. Don Jones is like the prince of debauchery around the American Hotel. When he was here, that was really in the heyday. That's when things were pretty wild around here. Lots of drugs, lots of drinking, lots of wanton sex, and every time you looked up, there was Don. He was a bit older than the gang. He was sort of like your bad older brother.
Handsome, dashing, daring, debonair, suave, sweet, mellow, cool.
Any situation that was crazy or wild or decadent, there was Don. I think I have seen and participated in just about everything a person can do in Ellsbar, from every kind of bodily function to every kind of interaction between people, every kind of scene that you can imagine. I remember one night I was bartending, and in the middle room the band was playing. I look up, and running across the stage are 2 naked guys streaking. This was like the early 80s. And I look up, and not only do 2 guys streak the stage, but one of them is Craig O'Rourke, my future husband. And I remember just looking up and thinking, that's the guy I'm dating. It was interesting. I remember a ritual that the waitresses used to have. We were always bent out of shape about something. Some guy had jilted us or broken our heart or cheated on us. And on Saturday night, when we closed, we would take all the empties and all the bottles. And when everybody was gone, we would do the Saturday night smash down, where we would throw beer bottles against the wall, cursing the men that we were mad at, screaming and yelling obscenities, and just smashing the shit out of all this glass. And it was great. It was very liberating. We had to clean it up when we were done, but it was definitely worth it. I'm a painter. I'm through and through, to the bone, a painter. Not interested in any other medium, not even interested in varying from oil paint that much. I almost don't draw either. For me, it's all about paint. I graduated Otis Art Institute, got my master's degree in 1981 at a time when people's MFA shows were like rotting meat hanging in the gallery and people having weird sex in front of cameras and things like that. I was really, really an oddball at school, certainly in those days, and even once I came downtown, because it was really the heyday of performance art and the Kipper Kids and all of that stuff and punk rock, and I was just an old-fashioned painter. I'm a figurative painter. I always have 30 years ago and today still paint fires, explosions, weather, things that happen. I'm fascinated with that angle of repose, that tipping point just before something happens when it's irrevocable, but it hasn't happened yet. I have a picture hanging in my studio that I've had for 35 years. It's a picture of a woman who had jumped out of a window, and a journalist just happened to be on the street with his camera and got this shot, and you see the facade of the building, the street with people going about their business because they don't know what's in the air, a split second above their heads, this body of the woman plummeting to the ground. And that's the moment. That's what every painting that I've ever painted is about. That moment when something is happened but not happening yet. I love that. I love debris flying through the air. I love lightning. I love volcanoes, tornadoes, all of that. So I always paint all that stuff, and then at the same time I'm always painting people. People falling, people flying through the air, and then people just sitting too. People interacting with that crazy universe around them. Peter Ivers was kind of a new age musician guy, and he had a radio show or TV show, a little bit of fame back then.
Hi, welcome to New Wave Theater. It was a custom in ancient Greece to pass a skeleton around the table before every banquet to remind everyone of their mortality.
He lived about 100 feet away from me at 3rd and San Pedro in the Schwartz Yarn Building, and he was murdered. He was bludgeoned to death in the middle of the night in our building. And the next day, we were just all walking around dazed because it was so frightening and so shocking. For me especially, I mean, it was, like I said, 100 feet away from me. I used to come home at night from Al's Bar, and it would be 2, 3 in the morning. And my building, we had to get out of your car, open a gate, drive in, shut the gate behind you, and I used to carry a huge cop flashlight, and I had one of the guys made me a strap so I could strap it to my arm so somebody couldn't take it away from me and use it against me. But you know, in all the years and all the times wandering around these streets by myself, nothing ever happened to me. But when Peter Ivers was killed, we all started watching our backs a little more. It was the end of the innocence. We started thinking about security and locking our windows and watching our back. It changed the tone of our life down here. Before then, we were all sort of in this fairy tale land.
Jesus! Oh, Jesus!
We were these artists dancing around LA and creating this world down here that we loved, and we just thought we were safe and we were immune to everything around us. And we would see things like people on crack or a dead bum, but it was sort of them and then our rarefied air that we breathed up here in the lofts. When Peter was killed, it got real. We weren't just waltzing around thinking we were immune to the world around us, where that world touched our world, and we realized that we were really part of it. It was a very spontaneous movement of people gravitating towards one place and wanting to make art and wanting to have a community. That was that moment of inception, the late 70s and early 80s, when everybody just kept coming here because we were all looking to be around each other and to be in an environment where people were making art and people got it, and it was a way of living. What's important is not that somebody famous came out of it or it would be remembered in the annals of art history, but that there was a time and there was a place down here that was just magic, where it all came together and it coalesced for a while and then it dissolved. Nothing will ever be like that time. I had just gotten out of college and I was looking for where I belonged in terms of being a person making art, in terms of this city and in terms of this world. And I just found it. I just found a home here. And historically, for me, it was really important. The future. I despair of the future in a lot of respects. I see a lot going on. There's hotels and restaurants and supermarkets and all these things that we didn't have then. I mean, it was really pioneer town back in those days. There's a lot more money down here than there was when we were down here. It takes a lot more money to be down here than it did when we were down here. And I think that that's an element that is not conducive to the development of young artists and all of that, because I think that once everything's expensive and everything's gentrified and there's fancy restaurants and it's not funky and you're not scrambling to get by, too much of your energy and time is spent getting enough money, and there's not enough left to explore what you're doing in terms of your art. To me, this doesn't even feel like an arts district. It feels like the art district on Main Street Disneyland. It doesn't feel real to me. With the computer and the internet and people not even doing things with their two hands really that much anymore, it's just all very different. And I think that there's something lost in not having a central place where people can congregate and be together. And that's not what I see happening here. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see the young kids who are yearning to find each other like we were 30 years ago. I just see a lot of people with money coming down to see what's going on, which is great in and of itself, but it's a different animal altogether.
Cut.